love to get a Trump surrogate to come back on your show to discuss this? I said, absolutely. I'll always give them the opportunity to come on and speak with me. And the lady joining us on the line right now, she is the Donald Trump 2024 Deputy Communications Director. She is Caroline Sunshine, who is nice enough to come back on the show. Caroline, I appreciate you coming back on with me. How are you?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
I am doing good. Appreciate the time. So you know what we're going to talk about today, obviously. My question...
Do I?
I think you do, and it's not going to be about Joe Biden. So this is the part, Caroline, that I just don't understand. I think it's fair game to talk about policy. We talked about this last time, but why is Donald Trump saying she turned black? Like, I just don't understand that statement. I feel like it's offensive. What is your take on that?
Well, it's not Donald Trump that's saying that. It's actually, if you look back at media reports, President Trump was just simply quoting what has already been written in the press. There was an article headline from the Sacramento Bee, of course, where Kamala Harris served in California as Attorney General, hailing her as the first Indian American Attorney General. There's another headline from Business Insider saying the exact same thing. Proud to have Kamala Harris be the first Indian American senator. Kamala Harris, in her own words, described herself as a proud Indian American. So President Trump was simply just literally quoting what has already been written about in the press. I'm not sure why that's controversial.
Understood. She's part Indian American. I think we all could agree on that, but that doesn't mean she's not black either. Both can be true. And my question still stands. This is someone, her father is from Jamaica. 94% of people in Jamaica consider themselves black. She went to Howard University, a historic black institution. She was part of Alpha Kappa Alpha, which is a predominantly black sorority. And again, her father is from Jamaica. So why make those statements and say she turned black? You know as well as anyone, you can't just turn black. Her father's from Jamaica. Her mother is Indian American. And quite frankly, I don't care what some newspaper said. She's
you
both.
Don't?
No, why would I care what I don't even know what some newspaper article said. All I care about is what I know, and that she's Indian American and her father is black. Why can't we just agree on that? And why is Trump obsessed with this? He put out her birth certificate today. And this is another thing that I wanted to ask you about. Birth certificates in California during the 1960s often did not specify the child's race. And while it listed her mother Caucasian, that doesn't change her identity. Why does Trump keep doing this, Caroline?
So it's really the liberal mainstream media that's always obsessed with race and with gender in this country, always. President Trump focuses on the American people. The American people are certainly focused on, I would like to say, the issues that matter to every American, whether they're black, white, brown, doesn't matter. But it's the media that is always so obsessed with race and with gender. You watch the first question, President Trump, there's a lot to unpack here. But you look at President Trump, who attended you're talking about Kamala Harris being a black woman. Can you answer for me why the likely nominee of the Democrat Party, a black woman, did not attend? Didn't think it was worth her time. She had a scheduling conflict. Well, the scheduling conflict was having lunch with the president in the White House. I'm going to tell you something. I worked in the West Wing of the White House. That does not meet the definition of a scheduling conflict. Well, the president and vice president can have, let me finish. The president and vice president can have lunch anytime they want. That is PR speak for she didn't want to go. So I think what Kamala Harris needs to answer is, look, President Trump clearly showed yesterday he has no problem going to places to take tough questions. He has no problem going to environments that probably aren't going to be particularly friendly to him. He's proved this for a long time, though. I mean, President Trump never turns down a tough interview. We never screen his questions. When he's out and about, he'll take questions from anyone, anytime, any place, anywhere. You saw the debate performance where he ended up ending Joe Biden's political career. That was, of course, hosted by CNN. But what you're not seeing is you don't see Kamala Harris go campaign in, let's say deep red Alabama, talking to a convention of, maybe hunters or something. Like, you're never going to see that. And that's because she doesn't even want to take a tough question from people who might even be favorable to her. So I think the question that still needs to be answered is why, if the media is so obsessed with Kamala Harris being a black woman, then why didn't she attend yesterday's convention at the National Association of Black Journalists, where 3 black female journalists were on stage, one of them masquerading as a commentator, I might add. She's no journalist. That was a commentator. There's a distinction. But why wasn't Kamala Harris on that stage? Why was it Donald Trump and not Kamala Harris who was on that stage? Of course, we know the answer to that. And the answer is that Kamala Harris doesn't want to take tough questions.
Okay,
and she has a liberal mainstream media that allows her to avoid having to take tough questions and face the voters and face reality.
Well, Donald Trump has refused to go on MSNBC for I don't know how many years now. I understand he did a town hall, but I think you could make the case on the other side as well. But go, I can't answer for the Harris campaign. I don't know what her schedule was. Here's what I do know. She's agreed to debate Donald Trump on September 10th. And I haven't heard that same agreement from the other side. So if you want to talk about people dodging other people, why won't, hold on, let me just finish now. Let me just finish now, and you have the floor with due respect. Donald Trump has not said, I will debate Kamala Harris on a debate stage September 10th. So while we can go back and forth on whether Harris should have been there, hey, I would have liked to have seen Harris there. I'll be honest with you. I would have liked to have seen her on that stage with Donald Trump. 150% I would have liked to have seen that. But it doesn't change my original question. When you say the liberal media is obsessed with color, why is Donald Trump saying that she turned black? Why are people on the far right, including Donald Trump, defending people saying she is a DEI hire? I don't hear Democrats saying she was a DEI hire. Why is Donald Trump defending that?
Well, let's not true. So yesterday you watched on stage, President Trump simply asked, after he got that nasty line of questioning. I couldn't even call that a question. I mean, you look at the first question President Trump was asked on that stage yesterday. That wasn't a question. That was a statement. That was a statement full of talking points that was loaded with bias.
Those were his statements. Those were his quotes. Those were his quotes.
You know, it's an interesting thing because I noticed that people in media are going to view this a lot differently than the American people. The American people watched that line of questioning yesterday and watched the bias, and they watched President Trump respond by simply asking, can you define DEI?
And she
did.
Can you
define it for me?
She did.
And she didn't. No, she refused to give a definition. She did not define it. She said diversity, equity.
Yeah.
No. She said diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
That's not what President Trump was asking. President Trump was asking her to define those three terms. And that's a question the American people have. The American people often get DEI this and DEI that. They have it at their places of work. They have it at their schools. And this is where, again, the liberal mainstream media is so out of touch with where the regular American is at. The regular American doesn't feel like somebody's been able to offer an adequate definition of DEI either. But President Trump spoke yesterday. The other thing that's getting overshadowed here is, again, you can say all you want, but there was one candidate that was on that stage yesterday. And President Trump did acknowledge at his rally later on that day in Pennsylvania that he would be happy to debate. Well, because you just said that he didn't say it, though. You said that he didn't. And
he was asked, was she hired because she was black? That was the next question, which is a very simple one. And Donald Trump couldn't answer the question. He said he didn't know and he couldn't give an answer. She was hired. Yes, she's black and she's a woman, but she was hired for her qualifications, not just because of the color of her skin. And I think that's very offensive that he couldn't answer that question. But let me ask you another one. He said he was the best president since Abraham Lincoln. Do you stand by that, even though Harry Truman in 1948 desegregated the U.S. military? In 1957, Dwight Eisenhower sent troops to Arkansas so black students could go to school without being physically assaulted. In 1964 and 1965, Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. And Trump wants to tell us that he's done more for black people than any of those presidents?
Well, I'm glad you bring up Kamala Harris's qualifications because I do want to talk about what those are and what those aren't.
Okay, that's fine, but can you answer that? Can you answer that?
I want to answer that question first. I'll answer that, but I want to answer this question first, and then I'll answer your second question.
Fair enough.
I want to bring up, like you said, Kamala Harris, because it's important, right? You just told me it's important to talk about Kamala Harris's qualifications.
Sure.
She got the job because she's qualified. So let's talk about what those are.
Sure.
Because as she is likely to be the Democrat nominee and running for president of the United States, Kamala Harris is the border czar appointed by the Biden administration that the liberal mainstream media now claims never happened. Of course, that was a title that the mainstream media literally gave her 3 years ago. It was all too gleeful. You can look at Axios' own words hailing her as the border czar. She was tasked with solving the causes of the root migration issues of people coming up to the southern border. You can word splice that and wordsmith that any way you want. That is a border czar. She's the border czar. Her qualifications are she's the border czar who has allowed upwards of 10 million illegal immigrants, 30 tons of fentanyl, 360 names off the terror watch list to come across our border. Her one task as border czar was to secure the border. She couldn't do that because she didn't want to do that. So she has failed at that job. Let me tell you, if you want to talk about qualifications, if any of your listeners were tasked with being border czar and that was their record, they'd be fired. They would be fired. You are not qualified to lead on anything. One person coming across our southern border is too many. 30 tons of fentanyl? 30 tons of fentanyl is enough fentanyl to kill every American citizen multiple times over. You know the leading cause of death in this country of ages 18 to 35? Take a guess. It's fentanyl. She's allowed 30 tons of it to come across the southern border.
I understand.
So if we want to talk about qualifications, those are Kamala Harris's qualifications.
Those are policy disagreements. Those aren't qualifications.
Those are not. How is that not? I think
those are policy disagreements.
A border czar,
which a lot of people would say is not a fair characterization that she was not the border czar, but go ahead.
It sounds like you've been reading Axios, trying to rewrite history for Kamala Harris.
I don't
but
read
everybody knows the truth.
I've never read Axios. I've never read Axios in my life. I'm my own person, and I'm not the liberal media. But again, go ahead.
Her qualifications. So if your job description is border czar, which is exactly what Kamala Harris was tasked with,
which is
the task of that job is to secure. That is true. You can look it up. The task of that job is to secure the border.
I get it.
Qualifications
you don't like what she's.
You allow.
I get it, Caroline. You don't.
Illegal immigrants. That's not the definition of securing the border. Okay. I'm so sorry. And those qualifications will be out on the ballot.
Caroline, I'm not here to defend her record on the border. I'm not here
I'm just speaking to her qualifications.
I understand, but when I say qualification, I'm talking about the color of skin. And when people call her a DEI hire, that's what I meant. We can talk about the border all day, and I'm with you. It is a problem, and Republicans and Democrats need to come together and fix it. I'm with you on that. I'm not defending her record on the border. All I'm simply saying is when you say she was a black hire or a DEI hire, this is a college-educated woman.
I did not say any of those things.
If she wasn't,
I didn't say any of those things. You asked me about
Understood.
Kamala Harris's qualifications, and I spoke to those. And those qualifications, as you mentioned, are on the border. I did not say any of those things.
Understood. I'm not saying you said it, Caroline. I understand that. But with that being said, if she's not a qualified person, then why did Donald Trump once donate to her campaign? Why would he donate to someone that you don't think is a qualified person?
Well, actually, President Trump addressed this back in 2016 when he first ran. You know, part of the reason that the liberal mainstream media has such animus towards President Trump, and has since he came down the escalator in 2015, is they view him as a defector to the system. President Trump is a highly successful businessman, self-made billionaire from Manhattan. He's not supposed to want to fight for the working class people of this country. He's not supposed to want a secure border. He's not supposed to want to stop war and bring peace to the world. He is viewed as he's addressed this back in 2016 when he said he used to write checks to all kinds of people. You know why? Because they would come to him begging him for money, just like they all go to everybody and beg people for money. I'm so glad you brought this up, because Kamala Harris is no different than any of the career politicians that she's worked for.
Can I ask you a question on that?
The last 50 years.
Can I ask you?
Yeah. Hold on. She's had a long political career of asking many, many people for checks. And that's the problem in this country.
I agree.
And that's what people love about Donald Trump, is that Donald Trump wrote the checks. He didn't ask for the checks. There's a huge difference. And as he said, people used to come begging him for money all the time. He gets it. He's seen it from the inside out. And that's why he works so hard to
I don't know.
To change the establishment system that we have in this country that doesn't benefit working class people.
If you're just joining us, by the way, Caroline Sunshine, nice enough to join us, the Donald Trump 2024 Deputy Communications Director. All right. So I don't know if there's any evidence out there to prove that Kamala Harris, quote, begged Donald Trump for money. All I know is he donated to her campaign. But I will say this, since we're on that topic, what would you consider a former president that sells Bibles? What would you consider a former president that sells gold sneakers that are worth about $10 to make for $300-400 a pop? He's selling Bibles. So you don't think that's begging people for money? What would you call that, Caroline?
I would call that capitalism. I would call that an exchange of goods and services. I would call that, that is quite literally an exchange of where, actually, I'm so glad you bring that up. So many people have wanted to buy these sneakers, buy these Bibles. I mean, President Trump has a successful businessman. People, and he's been a successful businessman for a long time. And actually, it's why we see so many young men, especially under the age of 30, moving their vote to President Trump, because they see him as this aspirational figure, which he very much is. You know how hard it is to make money in this country nowadays? You know how hard it is to start a business in this country?
So you're supporting making money off of the Bible. You're supporting that. The campaign supports selling Bibles and making money off a Bible, where just about anybody in this country could get a Bible for free. But he's selling Bibles that cost about $3 to make for $60. And you're supporting that?
Is there any law in this country?
I didn't say he was breaking the law. Is there any law for Kamala? I didn't say he was breaking the law. I never said that. I never said that. You're just complaining because you just made the case.
I didn't say that. I just asked the question.
Absolutely
I didn't
not.
Complain, and I didn't say that. I just
Absolutely not. I would never say it's against the law. Absolutely not. But you're talking about begging people for money, and I think somebody that's asking for $60 to buy a Bible that's worth $4 is begging people for money. But let's go back to the question.
That's not the definition of that. There's a huge difference between. I think what you're trying to equate is capitalism of a highly successful businessman, where capitalism is the exchange of goods and services, and a politician who literally will promise, people X, Y, and Z, and then ask for money. Those are not the same things. One of them is capitalism. One of them is the problem with the political system in the United States. Those are not the same things.
Let's go back to when Donald Trump was president. Got you. When he
Mhm.
was a politician, he said he wanted to fight election integrity. He received over $300 million in donations. Out of that $300 million, when he actually was a politician and he promised to do certain things, election integrity, he spent $5 million of that $300 million. And the rest of that money, most of it was put in his back pocket. So what would you say to that then, if we're talking about politicians asking people for money? He received over $300 million, claiming he was going to use it all to fight election integrity. He used just under $5 million to do so. So how would you defend that?
I think that's fake news. But I'm glad you bring up election integrity, because as President Trump has said, if we don't have safe and secure elections, we don't have a country. And so I know your listeners come from all different sides of the political spectrum. Some of them might be first-time voters to President Trump. Some of them, this might be their first election. President Trump has said we have to win, and we have to win big. And again, if we don't have safe and secure elections, we don't have a country. So I would love to encourage your listeners, if you're so inclined, you can visit our website, which is swampthevoteusa.com. If you've never registered to vote before, or you don't know how to vote, or you don't know where to vote, if you visit that website, we have all of the resources in one place so that we can make sure your ballot is secure and that your voice is heard.
If I may,
this is a really important election.
Absolutely. I agree with you. It is a very important election, and I appreciate you answering these questions. I do want to ask you one question about election integrity since you brought it up. This is a question I've always wanted to ask you guys. Back in 2016 and 2015, Trump said the election was going to be stolen. It was going to be rigged. Hillary was going to cheat. The Democrats were going to cheat. And then something happened. Donald Trump won. And as I've said since that day, he won a free and fair election. Hillary lost. She made a lot of campaign, mistakes, and there's probably a lot of other reasons, right? And Trump won, right? I'm sure you would agree with that. And then all the election integrity conversations went away for the next 3 years. The election wasn't rigged. Donald Trump won. And then those conversations happened again right before the 2020 elections, months before. And then he lost, and then all of a sudden the election was rigged. So why is it when he wins in 2016 and says it was going to be rigged, which it wasn't, everything is just fine and dandy, but then when Donald Trump loses, it must have been rigged? Why is that?
Well, I'm glad you bring up Hillary Clinton, because talk about somebody who is obsessed with elections not being rigged in her favor. It's really the Democrat Party that is so obsessed with this, just like they're obsessed with race and gender and anything that divides, this country along lines. Like, President Trump's running to be a president for all Americans. It's actually why you saw him go attend the convention for the National Association of Black Journalists. He wants to speak to every American.
He's the one who hasn't conceded. He hasn't conceded the 2020 election.
It's the Democrats that haven't done that are so obsessed with that. Hillary Clinton,
she conceded the next day.
Yeah,
not true.
I think you should fact check.
She called Donald Trump. No, it doesn't need to be fact checked because
it's the Democrats
she conceded.
In this country that are so obsessed with this, and then they project it back on the Republicans. But you can ask the average voter, if you look at the election interference that does happen in this country, mainly at the hands of the liberal mainstream media. Has anybody? Let me ask you this, and here's another tough question that Kamala Harris isn't going to face.
I'll answer anything. Go right ahead.
Why is it that nobody has been held accountable for the fact that during the 2020 election, over 50 U.S. intelligence officials signed a letter saying the laptop from hell was Russian disinformation. Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation. We have over 50 U.S. intelligence officials. One of them happens to be Dana Bash's husband, on the record saying this is Russian disinformation. The New York
Okay,
Post
sure. I'll
had to be
respond.
censored.
I'll respond to that.
Censored on social media, not allowed to share that story. You
Sure.
had big tech coming in to censor
I'll
that
respond.
story,
I'll answer.
saying it was Russian disinformation.
Sure.
No, but here's the real question. Why hasn't Kamala Harris or Joe Biden been held accountable for that? Both
Okay.
of them were involved in perpetrating that lie.
There's no
that is
evidence.
a lie to the American people.
Okay, so first of all, there's no evidence that has been proven in a courtroom that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris was hiding anything involved to the laptop. That's number one. You haven't seen the laptop. I haven't seen the laptop. We do know it exists.
The laptop was just entered into court.
I understand
as
that.
evidence
I
during
understand
Hunter
that.
Biden's
And number
trial.
three, there
So
were
it's very real.
and
It's not
number
Russian
three,
disinformation.
there were a ton of people out there saying he was sexually assaulting young Chinese boys, and there were a lot of things that people floated around there that were not true. So, but I'm not sure what that has to do with Donald Trump still lying and saying that the election was stolen. So now I want to ask you a question: Who won that? Who won the
election interference? That's blatant election interference. It is to have a liberal mainstream media and a Democrat Party working overtime to censor information from the American people the month before an election.
And what's in the Biden laptop? And what's been proven in the Biden laptop?
I don't know. I'm not Hunter Biden. Thank goodness.
Okay, so you don't know what's in his laptop. I don't know what's in his laptop.
But I know that it's not Russian disinformation, and I know that the liberal mainstream media, Joe Biden and the Democrats, for years, just like they also lied to the American people, telling them Joe Biden was fine, he's doing cartwheels, he's sharp as a tack.
We're both not doctors.
At least going back to, you don't have to be a doctor to see that Joe Biden was in such a state of cognitive decline. You just have to have eyeballs and ears.
Yeah, I do have eyeballs, and I think the last couple months.
You have to be honest, which is what Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party and liberal mainstream media are not, which is why they're about to, I think, get trounced pretty heavily by President Trump.
Well, we'll have to see what happens. But there is one question that you didn't answer, if that's okay, and then we'll let you go. And I appreciate your time, Caroline, very much so. It's a good conversation. The question that Donald Trump said he's been the best president for black people since Abraham Lincoln. I rolled off a bunch of things that presidents have done over the years, like desegregating the U.S. Military. Harry Truman did that. Sending troops to Arkansas so black students could go to school. Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. I think most people and historians would say those things that some of those prior presidents have done have helped black people far more than anything Donald Trump has done. Do you think Donald Trump is the best president for black people since Abraham Lincoln?
Oh, well, thanks for giving me an opportunity to talk about all the great things that President Trump did on behalf of African Americans when he was in office. He created an economy where, my goodness, we saw the lowest levels of unemployment for black Americans, opportunity zones. That was historic legislation. The First Step Act, Kamala Harris spent her career as a prosecutor in California locking up black men. President Trump came in, First Step Act, worked across the aisle, bipartisan, first of its kind legislation to right some of those wrongs. So I think, you look at let's talk about the African Americans in our country today and how they're feeling about an economy under Kamala Harris, under Joe Biden, that isn't working for them. An economy where, just like I said, it's always the media that wants to divide Americans along the lines of race or gender. But here's the reality. The reality is that when Americans go to get gas right now and it's $4 to $5 a gallon, it's that whether they're black, white, or brown. When they go to the grocery store and they buy 3 items at Target or Walmart or Costco and they look and go, why did that cost me $100? That happens whether they are black, white, or brown. The media, the Democrat Party love to push identity politics. It's poison for our country. But President Trump has said he's going to be a president, like I said, for all Americans. I think black Americans are looking to that future and looking about, how do I get more money in my pocket? They're looking and remembering the Trump economy, where it was an economy that lifted all tithes. And that is very much in the legacy of all of those great presidents who you mentioned came before. But I think President Trump does have a historic record, certainly in the modern era too, much different than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, who love to pander to the African American community and the black community, but then don't seem to have any interest in really addressing their problems. And we know this because if they did, Kamala Harris would have showed up yesterday to the National Association of Black Journalists. But as we know, she was busy. She had scheduling conflict at the White House.
I mean, if you want to talk about pandering, and maybe this could be another discussion, when Donald Trump goes to a so-called black church and 90 people in the church are white, I would say that's pandering. I would say holding up a Bible upside down in front of a church when the people in the church didn't even want him in the church, and holding up a Bible upside down when he's never made a phrase or memorized a phrase in anything in the Bible. Yes, yet he says the Bible is his favorite book. I think those are perfect examples of pandering. Last question for you, and I think this is also a very important one. In The Art of the Deal, I don't know if you read that book, Caroline. I did, actually. And in that book, Donald Trump identifies as Swedish, We've learned now that his father is German. His mother is Scottish. Donald Trump is 0% Swedish. So what a lot of people want, and I'm not saying you're doing this, but what a lot of people on the right, including Donald Trump, want to do is question how black Kamala Harris is. Why would Donald Trump lie in his book and say he's Swedish when he's not Swedish at all?
Well, I'm not familiar with that passage. You'd have to put it in front of me. But I would say that President Trump is proud to be American, and he wants to fight for this country and be a president for all Americans. And that's what this election is about. You know, you have Kamala Harris and the Democrats who believe in tearing down statues. How'd that go, by the way? All of those statues that Kamala Harris and the Democrat Party were all keen to tear down, how did that go? Did that help Black Americans have more money in their pockets? Did that help Black unemployment? I don't remember tearing down statues as being an effective means of having an economy that raises all ships and rising tides. So President Trump's proud to be American, and he wants to make this country great again, and that's what we're here to do. And gosh, if not him, then who? But you're fun to talk to, but sometimes I do think you watch too much, maybe CNN and MSNBC. I'm not sure.
Well, I can only tell you this, Caroline. First of all, I appreciate you coming on and having this conversation. I'll answer your question, and I'll answer it in the most honest way I can because I'm a pretty honest person. I'll put on Fox News. I'll put on CNN. I've watched maybe 5 minutes of MSNBC in 10 years. Or I don't know what else you labeled there or mentioned. I'm my own person. I'm a registered independent. And I make my own decisions, and I'll listen to both sides. And that's what I try to do on this show, even though we have some disagreements. I want people to hear your side. I want to hear us have a good, respectful conversation, which I believe we've had, and then let people decide, right, Caroline? I think that's the best way to go about this, right?
That's great. And that's what we want for our country. You know, that's exactly what we want for our country. And I think that's what we're going to get under President Trump. I really believe that. I think you look at the First Amendment, it's first for a reason. And people have to be free to express their thoughts in this country. You've done that. I've done that. And I'm really confident that the American people, despite what I think is tremendous liberal mainstream media bias that just distorts this country, people that want to divide this country, it's a pleasure to come on your show and to talk to you, and I agree. And let's make America great again November 5th. We'll see you at the ballot box.
Well, I hope we'll do this again down the road.
If it's a vote for free speech, then I know who you have to vote for.
Well, I don't feel like any politician's taken away my free speech, but thank goodness. But I don't think either candidate wants to take away anybody's free speech. But maybe that could be another conversation for another show. But Caroline, another
topic for another time.
Absolutely. But Caroline, I do appreciate you making the case. You're always welcome back anytime. Good conversation, and I appreciate your time, Caroline. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right, there you go. Thank you. Trump 2024 Deputy Communications Director Caroline Sunshine. We got into it a little bit, and now we're going to hear from the other side.